My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old. I've been married to my husband Kevin, who is also 32, for 3 years now. Both of us work full-time jobs, juggle household chores, and we've been making it work. We don't have kids yet, but life has been fun, just the two of us. I work in sales for a trading company. A tough job, but it pays well, while Kevin earns less. But he loves his work and takes pride in it, and I've always admired that about him. Kevin often goes fishing, his hobby, and I was okay with it because it was his way of taking a break from work. We keep our finances separate. Aside from splitting the rent, I cover all other living expenses. It's never bothered me. I didn't have hobbies like Kevin, and I enjoyed watching him have fun. I save up more, and I felt it was okay for me to support him financially. That's how I genuinely felt. If there was one thing that bothered me about Kevin, it was his family, especially his mother-in-law. We live close to them, and because mother-in-law has trouble walking, Kevin often visited. I didn't mind it much, and I'd accompany him whenever I could. Today, on our rare day off, we brought a gift and visited mother-in-law. Well, it's been quite a while, hasn't it? Sorry we've been away. Mother-in-law sighed, seemingly annoyed. It's only been 2 weeks since we last visited. Kevin went alone last week because I had to work on my day off. You may be busy with work, but you're also a wife, you know. Yes. Every time we meet, mother-in-law throws snide comments my way. She doesn't like that I earn more than Kevin. A woman should support and stand by her husband, she'd lecture. Mom, enough. We're handling it between us. Well, if you say so. I think mother-in-law, who's been a homemaker her whole life, can't relate to a working woman like me. Really sorry about that, Kevin said on our way back home. The constant passive-aggressive comments and lectures were stressful, but Kevin always stood up for me, which made it bearable. Hey, it seems like this month's rent hasn't been paid. Checking my bank account after work, I noticed there was no money. We couldn't make the withdrawal. Usually, Kevin deposits his half after he gets his paycheck, but it seems he forgot this time. I'm a bit short on cash this month. Again? This wasn't the first time. Sometimes he'd buy something and not have enough to cover his half of the rent. Annoyed, I let out a sigh, and Kevin chuckled nervously. Sorry, can you cover it this time? He said it like it was no big deal. I'd understand it if it were once in a while. After all, we all want to make a big purchase sometimes. But didn't you say the same thing last month? It's a limited edition fishing rod. You said the same thing last month, didn't you? Couldn't you have discussed it with me before buying it? Even though we have separate finances, if we can't stick to the budget, we can't make it work. Especially when Kevin only pays half the rent. If he doesn't even cover that, then I'm left to handle all the living expenses. That's just not fair. Ugh, enough with the nagging. Kevin interrupts me, clearly annoyed, letting out a sigh and furrowing his brows. Nagging? Sure, we've had these kinds of conversations before, but only about shared expenses. I never meddled in how he spends his own money. Why are you always talking about money, Sarah? Are you obsessed? I was genuinely shocked to hear him say that. Well, we can't live here if we don't pay the rent, right? Talking about money all the time is unattractive. What? Unattractive, Kevin says, looking right at me. Why would he say something like that? I liked that Kevin wasn't concerned about money, and I was okay with managing our finances. And now he calls it unattractive? Seeing my silence, Kevin seems to think he's won the argument. He relaxes his face and lets out a resigned sigh. You know, like my mom always says, a woman should stay home and support her husband. What? If you don't make me look good, you're the one who's going to be embarrassed. Kevin says this dismissively, then turns his attention back to his phone. I was at a loss for words. Kevin always apologized for his mom's outdated views, saying she didn't understand me. Was that his true feeling? What does making him look good even mean? Is it just about silently supporting the household? I'm home! Welcome back! I was greeted by my mother-in-law, Susan, after a long day at work. What? Susan? I wasn't informed she'd be here today. Ignoring my surprise, Susan takes my bag and heads inside. I rush in and am speechless at what I see in the living room. What is all this? Boxes and belongings are cluttered everywhere, leaving no space to walk. Not just Susan, but my father-in-law is here too. Kevin is casually watching TV and drinking a beer. What's going on here? Lower your voice. What is all this? Kevin frowns at my confusion. My parents moved in today. Moved in? Here? He never mentioned this, not even this morning. Ignoring my shock, Susan is happily unpacking. Wait, I wasn't told about this. My mom's legs are getting worse. It's hard for her to live alone. But we have extra rooms, so it's fine. It'll lessen your burden if my mom lives with us. That's right. I'll help with the chores. It'll be good for you since you're so busy. I guess they never really cared about how I felt. Even if I said no, it seemed like no one would listen. What hurt the most was Kevin's attitude. We had rented a larger house with extra rooms, thinking about our future family, but I never thought our family would grow like this. My life turned into a living hell. My in-laws, father-in-law and mother-in-law, took over the room we had saved for our future kids and acted like they owned the place. I couldn't even sit on my favorite sofa or use the dining table anymore. I was expected to do all the housework and wasn't even allowed to sit. The only time I could sit was when everyone else was asleep. Eating leftovers alone, I couldn't help but cry. What am I doing? How did it come to this? When I asked for financial help, they berated me, saying, "You're earning money. Why are you so stingy? Planning to take our pension too?" When I talked to Kevin, he looked visibly annoyed. What's the big deal? Mom is helping with the chores, isn't she? Even the chores were eventually pushed onto me, with complaints about aching legs. I did the laundry, but I didn't like having my father-in-law and mother-in-law do the washing together. I ended up doing my own laundry, and despite the increased workload and financial burden, no one listened. Worse, I was told, "I didn't think you were such a cold person. If you have complaints, then leave." The Kevin who said this was not the Kevin I had loved. Maybe I should leave. I never thought I could be happy with these people. Your cooking is bland. I don't like the clothes. Why are you so slow? Don't you care about your family? Every day I was criticized for various things. I got used to seeing my meals thrown away and my belongings tossed into the trash. I felt nothing anymore, even when they nagged me daily. About this month's living expenses. You're still talking about that? You earn well, it's fine. But my credit card is being used without my permission. Is this all you, Susan? I just borrowed it. I'll pay you back eventually. Mother-in-law snorted when I showed her the statement. I don't know what she spent it on, but how could she spend nearly $5,000 in a month? Well, she admitted to the unauthorized use. And there's no way she could deny it with all those brand name items in her room bought with my card. Kevin said nothing, even after seeing this. He stopped doing the chores we used to share and wouldn't even look at me. But I won't let this go on any longer. That's enough. The next day, after hearing that from my lawyer, I took a day off from work and left the house, only to return with a truck. What about work? Mother-in-law, who was home alone, asked curiously. She widened her eyes when she saw me and the people behind me. Sorry, Susan. It might get a bit noisy. What? Who are these people? Please, go ahead. Ignoring mother-in-law, I nodded to the 3 burly men behind me. I led them to my room, bypassing a stunned mother-in-law. Please move everything out of this room. Understood. I watched the movers efficiently pack and carry out my belongings, feeling a sense of relief. Who knew it could be so quick once you make up your mind to leave? Hey, what do you think you're doing? You can't just do this without my permission! My mother-in-law snapped back to reality and started yelling. Ignoring her, she began to make a phone call. Maybe she's calling Kevin, or my father-in-law, or both. I don't really care. By the time they get here, it'll all be over anyway. My mother-in-law tried to stop the movers with her foul language, but she couldn't stop these burly guys. Sorry, this is the last of it. Having moved almost everything out, I finally addressed my ever-nagging mother-in-law. I'm leaving. What? Could you please give this to Kevin? As I tried to hand her an envelope, the door burst open with a loud noise. Kevin, out of breath, was standing there. As expected, he arrived after everything was done. The whole moving process took just about 30 minutes. What is this? Kevin looked at my empty room, lost for words, and then glared at me. What are you trying to do? Perfect timing. Here, this is for you. Ignoring Kevin's intense glare, I smiled and handed him the envelope. Stunned, Kevin looked inside and was visibly shocked. Divorce papers? What? My mother-in-law also peered over, her eyes widening. How dare you give divorce papers to my son? It means exactly what it says. Shall we get a divorce? My son married you! You should be grateful and serve this family! The movers, who had been waiting, frowned at my mother-in-law's outrageous comment. Seeing their reactions, I was convinced that her behavior was indeed abnormal. Good, this isn't normal. You did say, if you have complaints, then leave, right? I didn't mean it like... Kevin hesitated. He probably never thought I'd actually leave. He couldn't have imagined I'd walk away. So you thought I'd just quietly obey? Well, I have plenty of complaints, so I'll do as you wished and leave. I'm not stupid enough to stay here and endure this. Leaving those words for a stunned Kevin, I walked out of the house with the movers. Sorry for involving you in this mess. I apologized. No problem. We understand, they smiled. You've had it tough, they all said, comforting me. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I was scared. I was sad. I was frustrated. But I managed to leave. I felt proud of myself for that. Later, I formally filed for divorce through my lawyer. If you have complaints, then leave. After that conversation, I had been quietly preparing for divorce. I consulted a lawyer and gathered evidence to support my reasons for divorce. Every complaint and snide remark from my mother-in-law and Kevin was recorded. I also documented any meals or personal items they had unjustly thrown away. My lawyer said I had enough evidence, so I immediately started the moving process. I had already signed a lease for my new place. All that was left was to move my stuff in. I chuckled at the few boxes that contained my life, but the thought of being surrounded by things I love excited me. I had to leave behind my favorite sofa and dining table, but I can always find new favorites. I heard from my lawyer that Kevin was stubbornly refusing to divorce. Apparently, Kevin and my mother-in-law even stormed the lawyer's office, demanding to know where I was. They also staked out my workplace, but my colleagues, who knew the situation, helped me avoid running into them. The evidence I had gathered against Kevin, my father-in-law, and mother-in-law was damning. If it went to court, I'd have the upper hand. Kevin finally agreed to the divorce when he realized how expensive a court battle would be. I also demanded repayment from my mother-in-law, not just for the alimony, but also for the money she had spent. She blustered about demanding money from me, but backed down when I mentioned I had evidence of her unauthorized use of my credit card. Family, huh? But her idea of family only included Kevin, my father-in-law, and herself. Did she forget how she'd always left me out? The word family, which she only used when it suited her, made me nauseous. After the divorce was finalized and the alimony paid, Kevin and his family moved away like they were fleeing. Their bad reputation had spread in the neighborhood, making it uncomfortable for them to stay. Plus, they couldn't afford the rent on Kevin's salary alone. Now, they're apparently living in a small house in the countryside, scraping by on Kevin's meager income and the parents' small pensions. I'm miserable without money. Won't you come back? Kevin has emailed me multiple times, but I've blocked him without even reading the full messages. As for me, I'm surrounded by things I love, doing a job I enjoy, and living a happy life. No one's throwing my stuff away anymore. No more worrying about complaints. Life is good. Now there's someone at work who's caught my eye. We're both busy, but he's a kind person who says we can take things at our own pace. He knows about my past failures and has told me he'll wait until I'm ready to trust again. We both want a life where we're independent but supportive of each other. That's the life I plan to live with him from now on.